Good day, chess world. So we return to our endgame work with this wonderful bit of work from Capablanca. And this one is, well, if you ever wanted to know just how good Capablanca is, this endgame we're about to go through is a demonstration of why he was head and shoulders above everyone else, an absolute giant of endgame play for his time. And this is the famous endgame, infamous, depending what side of it you might be on, of a rook and pawn endgame of 4 pawns versus 3, where on the one side of the board is all of the fight. On the king side, it is 4 versus 3 on the king side. Now, this game is a demonstration of Capablanca being just better than everyone else, because at the time, they thought theoretically this endgame was a draw. They thought, no, 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 there's not much chess left in this position. This is a draw. Since then, Capablanca, actually, as we will cover later on, many years later, nearly over 7 years later, played this same endgame, 4 pawns versus 3 on one side of the board, and transformed the theory. He demonstrated textbook ways of how, if you're going to win this kind of position, how do you do it? And it's quite fascinating because in this game, the theory that was written afterwards, people went, oh, okay, we know how to draw this. We know how to play this. And Capablanca actually played this kind of endgame for both sides a few times. And this one is valuable for us to see, a big one for us to take note of. So this is going to be a good one. The last endgame we went through was a very quick and short one. This one is a long one, demonstrating a lot of plans and a lot of technical skills we need. So shall we say, make sure you've got your coffee or tea and you are hydrated, and let's break into some of the principles and ideas we can learn before we examine the structure itself. So when we talk of the endgame of 4 pawns versus 3, this is the theme that we're talking about. This is the pattern of play. If we notice, black has 4 connected pawns on the king side versus black's 3. And we're going to break down what black should be aiming for and how that helps us to understand what we should be trying to achieve when we have the 4 pawns. What are the plans we're looking for as a decision? So let's just break down, first of all, some of the plans you're going to look and learn today and the approach, because it also carries through to other rook and pawn endgames. It's really, as we will see, one of his extremely famous endgames because he played this so well in these cases. So let's first unpack, what is it if you are the defending side, if you have the 3 pawns, what are you trying to achieve in this case? So we have in this situation the idea for the defender. This is going to be covered in game 50, and of course this one, game 15, endgame 15. This is a game where Duras is white, and this is against Capablanca, who's black, from 1913. And we'll see that the ideal for white is to build a kind of fortress, a beautiful little chain. Get their h-pawn up to h4. This is a very important plan for the defending side, because we're about to see Capablanca show why the defending side needs to do that. The second thing is you've got to find a way to keep your king active. In some shape or form, influencing the center, getting a contributing factor, because in this game, Duras's king ended up being exceptionally passive, and then that resulted in it turning into a target. And then finally, you've got to get maximum rook activity. You've got to harass the back pawns of the opponent. You've got to harass the opponent's king. You've got to work with that rook to keep it active. Passive defense will not do. So if we unpack these ideas, let's then talk about the side where we're playing now with the attacking side, the attacking blueprint. Number one, we need to deny that little fortress that we're going to look at, G3, H4. By the way, please sign up for the mailing list. This is exceptionally important to get the notes on these ones, because you're going to have to work on this one offline. This is, for the first time, a really technical endgame that we're going to look and learn from. The second theme is you've got to force pawn weaknesses. We're going to see that from Capablanca. He's going to split his opponent's pawns, and then he's going to use that plan of generating the pass pawn. The third thing, you have to be able to get your king in. You've got to turn your king into an offensive weapon. It takes time, but we're going to see how Capablanca does that in this one. Creating threats, turning the enemy king into a target. And then finally, that's the next theme. Build a cage around the enemy king where you leave them with no good choices. Their king is a target, And of course, your king and rook work together with your pawns to cage them in and force them into this, as we'll see, loss. So first and foremost, I want to unpack, it's very important. Structurally, your opponent's, well, the side with the 3 pawns is looking for this. This is the dream ideal, is they've got to get these pawns up like this. There's only 1 pawn then in the chain they have to defend. It's the furthest away. It's very difficult for the black king to get involved and get to that pawn. And of course, white's king is contributing as much as it can. So when we say active, you can't run away from the pawns. You hold this line in this case. And f2 is what you're focusing on. Then from white's point of view now, use the rook to harass this pawn or whatever the next back pawn might be in these cases. And this is part of that big theme. So now that we've unpacked, that's what they're aiming for. We'll cover this again, don't worry. This is more of an introduction of how do you win it? How do you convert having that extra pawn? So first and foremost, Duras did write about this game that this is basically, he felt this should be a draw. It's only one pawn on one side. This is a big deal in this case. So let's unpack from the side of Capablanca. What does he do? We know that the opponent wants to get here. How does Capablanca know this? No one knows. Capablanca had this cosmic power almost of understanding, especially in endgames, strategically. Where do the pawns go? Where do the pieces go? What are we looking for? And that's what we're looking to focus with here. So he kicks it off with h5. Why? Because he immediately wants to stop this pawn getting to this square. He knows the plan. So g3, h4, absolutely brilliant. This endgame is not in any way, shape, or form lost, but it is worse for white. As we're going to see, we keep the pressure on, because this is another factor that ties into these kind of endgames, is the fatigue factor. We're now approaching move 40. These guys have been playing a very long time, and it's very difficult in this latter part of the game where white has no prospect of winning. White's win is to hold a draw, which makes it very challenging. So here we get this moment of pawn takes on h4, rook takes h4. It's a tricky situation. Probably the capture is slightly incorrect because now he's got so many more weaknesses. These pawns are split. But I'm not going to be too critical of this defense at this stage because it's not like he's lost yet, but it is a very difficult position to hold. So now Capablanca plays e5. Why? Because that is his extra pawn. He wants to gain space. The king moves to g3. He chooses rook d4. Now the opponent plays rook up to h4. Probably not the best idea here. He's got to try and keep that rook on the 7th. Now he plays rook a7. What should we do here with black? We've so-called created 2 split pawns. We know we've got an extra pawn. We're a little bit better. How should we approach it? Because I also want you to see with the factor that all the pawns are on one side of the board, in the endgame, we've got those 2 plans. Plan number 1, attack your opponent's weak pawns. It's very difficult to do here because the king can watch both pawns and we cannot bring another piece to attack them. So very challenging. Then plan number 2, use your pass pawns. Once again, a massive challenge. If we're just going to push f5, e4 and trying to get a pass pawn over here, I think we're just going to lose a pawn. So, because their king is stationed well. So what do we need to do? Well, of course, we need to activate all our pieces. They need to get the king in. And that's why we take it slow and steady here. King g8. The king's got to take the long way round, but this is important. The king is going to get in. King g6, rook e7. Great job here by this moment by white. His rook is trying to cause as much trouble as possible. This is also what makes it difficult for white to defend, is that as black, you can just keep pressuring the opponent, pushing them, where you try this, you try that. It's not going to cost you anything. And this is a great example of us trying stuff, because now the king has to go back to g2. If the king goes to g4, watch carefully what happens. Tell me here, black to play and win it. How does black win this one? Yes, we follow the checks. Check, king h4, king f6, check over here, and rook takes h3, checkmate. So this is just crazy in this situation, the problems that the white king has. Remember what I said to you about using the pawns? and the piece is to build a cage. That is exactly the goal that we have in this situation. I want you to see how we turn the enemy king into a target. This is a big deal. Now, the next phase that we're looking at here, they have to go king to g2, only move. Then he plays this nice little move, rook d5, trying a different thing. His idea is he wants to push f5, the plan we've just seen, get king f6, and get himself rolling. So the opponent plays king g3, f5, and notice what Capablanca did. He gave the check and said, hey, maybe my opponent makes a mistake, runs forward with the king, gets their king caught in that cage. So I do want you to see what makes it very challenging here. Rook a7, rook d3 check, he rinses and repeats. Now he pushes e4. Part of the plan, as we will see, is potentially to push and make a pass pawn, but he's not going to rush on this. He doesn't want to rush. He wants to bring his whole structure forward. So his opponent now, this is technically the, should we say, losing mistake against Capablanca, but I'll be very honest with you. It is a nightmare to defend. This is one of those positions where the very best move is to push h4, but boy, is that hard to see. Very, very challenging at these stages. Because you're pushing the pawn. It's such an easy target in this case. Boy, is this a difficult one. And the whole theme is this draw. Now that the rook would come here, g6, then the rook would go back. King moves up to the square, and then to see this idea to hold a draw, rook check, king up to g4, rook here. That's why we said keep your rook as active as possible. But this is so challenging because it doesn't look logical. His opponent has to now calculate 5 moves into the position just to find this kind of drawing technique where he simplifies the pawns. So I want to highlight that this is now a draw, and we'll get into this later where, you know, you got the 2 pawns versus 1. There's a later endgame where Capablanca wins a structure like this by almost tricking his opponent. This one here is not too challenging, but it's so difficult to get here in your head because h4 seems illogical. Very difficult defense. And if you can do that on the black side, if you can put the opponent into situations where they have to find moves that are not logical, that are an exception, then you're probably going to be successful. So he plays rook a4, the king goes to g5, rook to a5, pawn to g6, and he just keeps moving the whole structure forward with the intention of squeezing and building a cage around his opponent's king. So rook b5, he's got to try and cause some activity here, but it's very difficult to do this. So king f4, rook a5, he doesn't know what to do, and here comes the first big threat. Now there is a problem. e3 is dangerous. So he has to stop e3. So rook to a4, he then pushes g5, rook to b4, he must stop this. So Capablanca says, fine, I'll bring my king back. Now we get check, the rook blocks. This is the whole time why Capablanca has kept his rook on this file, so he can intercept, block the opponent. Let's just unpack, of course, exchanging rooks is impossible. This is a lost endgame. Why? Because he's simply going to march his king forward, make the pass pawn, and then promote at the right time, depending which pawn he wants to win with. There is no chance in this case for a defense. Let's just unpack that very quickly, because let's say the king tries to run around to intercept. The king goes over here, f4, oops, the king has to move, f3, oops, the king has to go backwards here, e3, remember what I said to you, make the pass pawn and win it, and that's what we see here. Captures, king takes, king moves across, push pawn, and the king gets squeezed out, and we simply win it. There's too much of a space problem. So he keeps his rook on. He plays rook down. Okay, what do we do here? How do we play? He's doing a good job of keeping the rook active. Well, we found our plan. We want our rook to be on this side of the board and create this threat of pushing e3 or f3. So we push our pawns. Very valuable in this situation. It's not the only way, but it's a very nice logical plan here from Capablanca. The king now jumps up to d4. And this is really very difficult to handle. I do want you to see something important that Chernev included in the book, that black could have played for this mating combination, this attack, captures, king now to f6 with e3 coming in. That's not Capablanca's style. Capablanca, this is risky. He has to calculate precisely to get this. If he makes a mistake, it just doesn't work. Now, this is winning, yes. But Capablanca is very clever. He says, hold on, I could always make this happen later. I don't need to sacrifice. Let's first see my opponent prove he can defend. Very clever from Capablanca, and that's his style in the endgame. It's something Carlsen was exceptionally good with. If you force the opponent to find these kind of defenses, then it could be a bit of a problem. So king to d4. Now the king goes to f1. Now, okay, what do? We just bring our king forward. And this is becoming exceptionally dangerous because his rook now is being caught out. There's an easy plan of just going to promote a pawn. So we get rook a8. And now what should we do? What do you think Capablanca's plan is here? How do we think we get to handle this one? And what's our theme? Well, remember what I said to you about building a cage? And that's exactly what Capablanca envisages here. With very little risk, he sees now what he can do is push e3. And as we'll see, it's a little bit of a misstep from Capablanca. His opponent gets one chance to save himself. What Capablanca missed was the easier win is actually just to push f3. And the reason for this is that now if check, it looks like the king will be harassed. Oh, there's a mate net. There's a mate net. So now the problem is the white king has been turned just like this into a target. And this is the theme that he should have been playing for. Plus his king can still come back and cause trouble over here. So he played e3. Let's see who can find and research. Put it in the comments below. What is the only line that holds a draw? It's not an easy one. It's, again, very technical, where he has to see quite deep in the position. But he made a mistake now. He played rook check, and now he's lost because king to e4, pawn takes e3. And what he thought was, I can capture. And then what happens is my rook gets time. It gets in behind, and I'm going to be able to harass the enemy king. I will hold a draw here in this position. As strange as it might seem, this is what he was hoping for. Capablanca says, no chance. Now he pushes f3. And it seems so strange, but the whole concept, let's have a look how Capablanca wins it now. He's now made this wonderful pass pawn. If the opponent delivers a check, we say, thank you, I'm going to take with a king. If he goes check again, we come back out, and suddenly we see the point. White's king cannot stop black from getting to g3. Boom. There closes the cage. White's king is in this net. If he runs away, we're going to be able to push and promote the pawn. Let's just see what I mean by that. Let's say he plays now rook check, king across. He tries to run. Simple enough. Check. No. There's no chance to stop this pawn. Check. And we will get a queen. No chance. So what a horrible situation for him to be in this case. So after f3, very clever. The opponent tries to play king g1, just trying to run away so he won't get checkmated. And Capablanca is ruthless. Simply rook d3. He wants to take the pawn and build that net, but also have the king involved to promote. And I do want you to see, even though we have 2 pawns versus 2, very much lost, because why? We're back to those basic plans. Plan number 1, attack your opponent's weak pawns. We're doing that. Plan number 2, use your pass pawns. We've got that. So the rook moves to a8, king takes e3. We've just seen the idea. The king wants to come round. He tries to deliver check, plays rook g1. Why? It's the only chance to stop the king getting in. So what are we going to do to win this one? How do we succeed? Well, first things first, that cage. Close the cage on the enemy king. Rook d1 check. The king runs up to f2. Rook d2 check. King runs to f1. And now we have this moment. Now let's just say the king went back to g1. Then we still have the same wonderful cage. We play check. If the king runs into the corner, watch this win from Capablanca. I want you to think here, very, very pretty what the idea is in this one. Many ways for us to succeed, but the idea is rather simple. Push pawn. And now if the pawn captures, in will sweep the king, and there is no chance to stop rook here, checkmate, also pawn here, checkmate, also pawn here, checkmate. Too many checkmates in this one. It's just about picking which one succeeds. There's also the immediate check, king here, check, king moves to f1, rook down to h1, and promotion is unstoppable. What a spectacular bit of work. And again, I want you to see this theme of turning the enemy king into a target. That should carry through to all your rook and pawn endgames. You want to turn exactly in this situation, as we've seen from Capablanca. Remember this. Store this, as we call in chess, store this chunk in your head, where the opponent's king is completely cut off and turned into this vulnerable target. Our king is this powerful offensive weapon. And do you see how our pawn, the white's pawn, white's pawn, it's not ours, works brilliantly to help us. So he tried king f1. He's trying to keep his king away, but rook h2. Capablanca goes back and says, I'll just take this pawn. Everything we've just seen, I'll do with a little bit of extra material. Rook g7, push pawn, rook to g8. And now tell me, how do we win it? What's our plan from here? Very, very instructive in this case. Again, another one to store in your memory banks for our goals. The easiest way, there's a few ways, but this pattern we've just seen, put the king on g3, and then we have ourselves a simple win because we are going to go check, rook here, check, and promote. Also, if you really want to, we can sweep the rook, take our time, go for this kind of checkmate. There is just too many wins in this position. So the opponent resigns. Do yourself a favor, take this, play this against Stockfish, set it up on full strength. Many places you can do it, just to practice. Hey, how would I finish off? How would I get this last little bit to convert in the most efficient way? And overall, we started with this endgame where it's fundamentally, uh, theoretically, it's drawn, it's equal. But actually, we've seen Capablanca apply so many of these principles now of how you get this win in. And that idea of rushing up the H-pawn is such an important theme. And I just want to highlight that one because he was able then to disturb the structure. They're not all connected in one pattern. And that's why it's so very instructive when we see this intention where he gets his pawn up to h4. I want you to remember this theme because the theme really is to split the pawns, to create the most weaknesses. Also, logically, you're playing black. If you were to trade off all the pawns, you're going towards a theoretically drawn endgame, which is pretty easy if there's just one black pawn on the board. So to trade pawns makes sense. But Capablanca also does it such a brilliant job to stop the opponent from building the right structure. Then the next theme that we see is that slow progression when he gets that king running up the board. Don't forget how often he set up these little mating nets and getting those themes round. Getting his king up the board, getting the opponent pushed backwards. Already by this stage, the game is getting out of control, and this progression continues. Then finally, this breakthrough where he took his time, sent his king up the board, pushed e3, which was actually a bit of a mistake, but the plan was the right thing because the defense is so good. Don't forget to put in your comments, how does white draw this? Go try and examine, analyze, find what is done. But now after this moment captures f3, spectacular win. There's no surviving this. This is a brilliant job, turning the enemy king into a target. And then our final theme, stick in your memory bank. This is what you want to do to the opponent. Keep them caged in, keep them with problems, and finally turn their king into this target. What a wonderful win. So please join up to the mailing list and let's continue. The next game, not quite like this end game, not as technical, but a wonderful theme against Teichmann that we will go through. Join us in the next one. And also, most importantly, thank you for following through on all of this. Please put also in the comments what you found most instructive, what the most useful. Also, you got any queries or questions? I'll be able to answer, the community can answer, put them down. And we'll pick it up and we'll take it in the next one against Teichmann.